The alarm shrieked through the cargo section of Brightness 7, and Pilot Officer Rin felt every crystal in their body vibrate with dread. They had been inspecting shipping manifests in the quarantine bay when the sound began, that awful piercing wail that meant something had gone terribly wrong. Containment breach in holding cell 9, the automated voice announced, calm, despite delivering a death sentence. All personnel evacuate sections C through F. Lockdown protocols initiated. Rin's crystalline fingers trembled as they pulled up the manifest on their datapad. Holding cell 9. Their worst fear crystallized into reality when they saw what had been stored there. A Thornback Ravager from Hadros 9. Class 12 Death World Predator. 8 limbs. Armored plates thick enough to stop plasma fire. Venomous spines that could paralyze a Dulmar in seconds. And worst of all, intelligent enough to hunt with strategy. The corridor erupted in chaos. Workers from a dozen different species scrambled toward emergency exits. The Avalari moved in their typical ordered fashion, but even they could not hide their terror. The Dulmar were already 3 sections away, their bureaucratic nature abandoned in favor of pure survival instinct. Even the usually brave Keshan security officers were falling back. Weapons drawn but hands shaking. Rin had seen footage from Talos 3. An entire research colony destroyed when 3 Thornback Ravagers escaped containment. 247 beings dead in less than 6 hours. The creatures were unstoppable once they started hunting. Their armor could withstand heavy weapons fire. Their speed defied logic for something so massive, and their hunting intelligence made them terrifyingly efficient killers. The sound of tearing metal echoed from somewhere above. Rin looked up and saw claw marks gouged into the ceiling panels, deep furrows that cut through reinforced steel like it was paper. The creature was in the ventilation system now, moving through the station like a nightmare given form. Rin ran toward Cargo Bay 5, following evacuation protocols. Their training said to get to the nearest safe room and wait for security teams to handle the situation. Their instincts said to get as far from this section as possible. Both agreed on one thing: run. They burst through the doors of Cargo Bay 5 and stopped short. A human was there, standing calmly near a stack of supply containers. He was checking a handheld scanner, seemingly unbothered by the screaming alarms and the terrified beings fleeing past him. "You need to evacuate," Rin said, their voice cracking with urgency. "Now, there is a Thornback Ravager loose on this station." The human looked up. He was average height for his species, with dark hair and calm brown eyes that showed no fear. His uniform identified him as Dennis Cole, cargo specialist. He glanced at his scanner again before responding. "How big?" he asked. Rin stared at him. "What? The Ravager? How big is it? Adult? Juvenile? Does it matter?" Rin felt their panic rising. How could this human be so calm? "It can kill everyone on this station." "Probably," Dennis agreed, still looking at his scanner. "But I need to know what I'm dealing with. Also, what was it eating before transport? And was it sedated?" Rin wanted to scream. Instead, they pulled up the shipping manifest with shaking hands. Adult female. Approximately 4 meters long. It was being transported for research purposes, sedated with Class 7 suppressants. Last feeding was 3 days ago. Standard protein supplements. Dennis nodded slowly, processing this information like he was planning a simple inventory check rather than facing down a legendary predator. 3 days. So it's hungry and confused. The sedation would have worn off maybe an hour ago, which means it woke up in a strange place with strange smells and no idea where it is. "It is a killer," Rin said. "From Telos 3 they were provoked," Dennis interrupted gently. "I read the reports. The colonists tried to exterminate them as pests, set up plasma nets, used sonic weapons. The Ravagers were defending their territory." Another sound echoed through the station, closer now, a deep rumbling roar that resonated in Rin's chest. It was not the sound of a mindless beast. It was the sound of something angry and afraid, lashing out at a world it did not understand. "We need to leave," Rin insisted. Dennis tucked his scanner into his belt and picked up a container of food rations. "You should probably go. I need to find that Ravager before security does." "That is insane. You will die." "Maybe," Dennis said, walking toward the door. "But everything that acts aggressive is usually just scared or defending itself. Same rules apply whether you're on Earth or out here." Rin watched him leave, stunned into silence. The human was walking toward certain death with the same casual attitude someone might have walking to lunch. It defied all logic, all reason, all sense of survival. But Rin had not survived this long by being reckless. They had survived by following protocols, by being cautious, by respecting danger, and yet something made them follow the human. Perhaps it was duty. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was the calm certainty in Dennis Cole's voice when he talked about the Ravager not as a monster, but as a frightened animal. They caught up to him 2 corridors over. He was studying scratch marks on the wall, running his fingers over the gouges thoughtfully. "It's avoiding the main corridors," Dennis said quietly. "See? It could have gone straight through, but it went up instead. It's trying to hide, not hunt." Rin looked at the destruction and saw only terror. The human looked at the same marks and saw something entirely different. Somewhere in the darkness above them, the Thornback Ravager was moving, and Dennis Cole was tracking it like this was just another day at work. This human, Rin thought, was either the bravest being they had ever met, or the most foolish. Time would tell which. Commander Horvath watched the security feeds with growing horror. The Thornback Ravager moved through the maintenance tunnels with terrifying efficiency, its 8 limbs propelling it through spaces that should have been too small for something its size. Every few minutes it would stop, test the air, then change direction. It was not moving randomly. It was searching for something. "Weapons free," Horvath ordered. "Lethal force authorized." The security team moved into position, heavily armored Keshan officers with plasma rifles. They had trained for this. Dangerous cargo escapes happened occasionally, though never anything quite this deadly. The plan was simple: corner the creature in Section D where they could vent the atmosphere if necessary. It would kill the Ravager, but it would also save the 1,000 beings currently sheltering in the habitation rings. On another screen, Horvath watched something far more disturbing. The human cargo specialist was moving through the lower corridors, following the Ravager's path with nothing but a scanner and a bag of supplies. Following him was Pilot Officer Rin, the Avalari's crystalline form reflecting the emergency lighting in fractured patterns. "Get those 2 out of there," Horvath snapped. "They are not responding to communications, Commander," the officer replied. Horvath cursed in 3 languages. Humans. They were useful workers, strong and adaptable, but their Death World origins made them reckless. This one was apparently suicidal. Dennis moved carefully through the corridor, his eyes scanning every surface. The scratch marks were fresher here, the metal still warm where the Ravager's claws had torn through. He could smell something too, a sharp organic scent that reminded him of the big cats back on Earth when they were stressed. "It went this way," he said quietly, pointing toward a torn access panel. Rin stayed close behind him, every instinct screaming to run but curiosity overriding fear. "How can you tell?" "The scoring pattern on the metal. See how it curves? That's from the back claws, which means it was moving fast, probably scared." Dennis knelt down, examining something on the floor. "And there's blood here. Not much, but enough." "It hurt itself breaking out of containment." "Good," Rin said, then immediately felt ashamed. "I mean, perhaps it will slow down. Or it will make it more desperate." Dennis stood, adjusting his grip on the supply bag. "Injured animals are unpredictable. We need to be careful." They followed the trail deeper into the maintenance section, away from the populated areas. Dennis noted this with approval. The Ravager was not hunting. If it wanted to kill, it would have headed toward the habitation rings where thousands of potential prey gathered. Instead, it was moving away from everyone, seeking isolation. "Tell me about Earth," Rin said suddenly, needing the distraction from their fear. Dennis smiled slightly. "What do you want to know?" "They say it is the most dangerous world in the civilized galaxy. Class 13 higher than Hadros 9. "That's true. So how did your species survive?" Dennis was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain. "We learned to work with the danger instead of just fighting it. We had animals that could kill us easily. Big predators with claws and teeth. Venomous creatures. Animals that could crush us or poison us or tear us apart. But we figured out that most of them did not want to kill us. They just wanted to live their lives. But the Ravager from Telos 3 were defending their home," Dennis said firmly. "The colonists saw predators and decided to eliminate them. They did not try to understand them first. They did not try to coexist. They chose violence, and the Ravagers responded with violence." A sound echoed through the corridor, that same deep rumbling roar. "Closer now." "Much closer," Rin froze, every crystal in their body rigid with terror. Dennis held up a hand. Stay calm. Don't run. Running triggers the chase instinct. That thing has a chase instinct? Rin's voice was barely a whisper. Everything does. They rounded a corner and there it was. The Thornback Ravager filled the corridor, its armored bulk seeming impossible in the enclosed space. Four eyes arranged in pairs glowed with an amber light. Its mouth opened, revealing rows of serrated teeth designed to tear through armor and bone. The venomous spines along its back stood erect, a clear threat display. Rin could not move, could not breathe. They were going to die. This was how it ended, torn apart by a Deathworld monster in a maintenance corridor on a trading station far from home. Dennis stepped forward. No, Rin managed to whisper, but the human was not listening. Dennis raised his empty hands, palms forward. He did not make direct eye contact with the Ravager, but kept it in his peripheral vision. His posture was relaxed, non-threatening, and he started talking, his voice low and calm. Hey there. I know you are scared. This place does not smell right, does it? All these strange beings, strange sounds, strange everything. You just want to go home. The Ravager tilted its massive head, regarding Dennis with what might have been confusion. Its spines lowered slightly. That's it, Dennis continued, his voice steady. Nobody here wants to hurt you. I know that is hard to believe after being stuck in that containment cell, but it is true. You are just trying to survive. I understand that. Slowly, deliberately, Dennis sat down on the floor. He made himself smaller, less threatening. The Ravager watched this with all four eyes, its breathing heavy but less frantic. You are hurt, Dennis said, noticing the way it favored one of its rear limbs. That must hurt a lot. And you are hungry too, right? 3 days without proper food. That is rough for a big predator like you. Rin watched in absolute disbelief as the Thornback Ravager took one step forward, then another. It was approaching Dennis, but not with hunting posture. Its movements were cautious, almost curious. That is right, Dennis said softly. Come check me out. I am not going to hurt you. Just a weird, soft creature from another death world, that is all I am. The Ravager came within 3 meters, 2 meters, close enough that Rin could see the individual armored plates, the dried blood on its injured leg, the way its nostrils flared as it scented Dennis, close enough to kill him in one swift movement. Dennis did not run, did not scream. He just sat there talking quietly, letting the creature investigate him at its own pace, and the Ravager, impossibly, did not attack. Instead, it backed away slowly, still watching Dennis but no longer displaying aggression. It turned and moved down another corridor, disappearing into the shadows. Rin finally remembered how to breathe. What just happened? Dennis stood up, brushing off his uniform. First contact. Now it knows I am not a threat. Next time will be easier. Next time? Rin's voice went up an octave. You want to do that again? We need to help it, Dennis said simply. Before security finds it and someone gets killed. The security team was closing in from 3 directions. Dennis could hear their coordinated movements through the station's structure, the heavy footfalls of armored Keshan officers, the hum of charging plasma weapons. They had maybe 10 minutes before the situation turned deadly. We need to find it first, Dennis said, moving faster now. Rin followed, still processing what they had witnessed. The human had sat in front of a Thornback Ravager, talked to it like a fellow being, and survived. It defied everything they knew about apex predators from death worlds. It defied logic itself. The cargo manifest, Dennis said suddenly. Pull them up. What else came from Hadros 9 on that transport? Rin's fingers worked quickly across their datapad. Mineral samples. Atmospheric processors. Botanical specimens for research. Why does this matter? Because it will go somewhere that smells like home, Dennis explained. That is what animals do when they are scared. They find familiar scents, familiar territory markers. Where would those botanical samples be stored? Cargo Bay 12, Rin said. But that is on the other side of the station. Then we better move. They ran through the corridors, taking service passages that paralleled the main routes. Dennis had worked on Brightness 7 for 2 years, knew its layout better than most. He could navigate the maintenance sections with his eyes closed. They reached Cargo Bay 12 just ahead of the security team. Dennis overrode the door locks with his cargo specialist credentials and they slipped inside. The bay was large, filled with containers stacked 3 high, labeled with dozens of different world designations. And there, in the far corner, Surrounded by containers marked with Hadros 9 identification codes, was the Ravager. It had torn open several containers, spreading their contents across the floor. Native vegetation from its homeworld. Processed samples that still carried the chemical markers of familiar territory. The creature was lying among them, its massive body curled in a posture that looked almost vulnerable. Dennis approached slowly, making soft sounds so the Ravager knew he was coming. It raised its head, regarding him with those 4 amber eyes, but did not display aggression. "You found a little piece of home, did not you?" Dennis said gently. "Bet that smells better than all this metal and recycled air." Up close, Dennis could see the extent of its injuries. Deep lacerations along its side where it had forced itself through the containment cell's damaged door. The injured leg was worse than he thought, possibly a fracture, and there was blood around its mouth, suggesting internal damage from whatever sedatives they had used during transport. Rin stayed near the door, broadcasting everything back to Station Command. They could hear Commander Horvath's voice over the comm, demanding explanations, threatening to override the door locks and send security in anyway. "Give me 5 minutes," Dennis said into his comm. "Just 5 minutes before you do something we will all regret." "That thing is a killer," Horvath replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "That thing is a scared animal far from home," Dennis countered, "and it is hurt. I need medical supplies, basic trauma kit, antibiotics suitable for Hadros 9 biology, and something for pain management." "You are insane." "Probably," Dennis agreed, "but I am also right. Check your surveillance. This Ravager has had a dozen chances to kill station personnel. It has not taken any of them. It could have gone into the habitation rings and caused real damage. Instead, it came here to the one place that smells familiar." There was a long pause. Then, surprisingly, it was Rin who spoke up. "He is correct, Commander. I have been with the human this entire time. The creature is displaying fear behaviors, not hunting behaviors. Everything Dennis Cole has predicted about its movements has been accurate." Another pause. Then Horvath's gruff voice. "Medical supplies are being delivered to the cargo bay entrance. But if that thing makes one aggressive move, we are venting the bay." "Understood?" "Understood," Dennis said. Rin retrieved the supplies, moving carefully but with less terror now. They were beginning to see what Dennis saw, looking past the armor and teeth and spines to the injured, frightened being underneath. Dennis opened the medical kit and began preparing what he needed. The Ravager watched him with intense focus, tracking every movement. When Dennis approached with supplies in hand, it tensed but did not back away. "This is going to hurt a little," Dennis said, as if the creature could understand. "But it will help. Trust me." He started with the leg, cleaning the wound with careful efficiency. The Ravager flinched but held still, its breathing heavy but controlled. Dennis worked methodically, the same way he had learned in wildlife rehabilitation back on Earth. Slow movements, calm voice, constant communication even if the words meant nothing to the animal. "You know," Dennis said as he worked, "on Earth we have these animals called wolves. Big predators, pack hunters could easily kill a human, but thousands of years ago, some of our ancestors decided to try befriending them instead of fighting them, fed them, sheltered them, worked with them. And you know what happened?" Rin edged closer, fascinated despite their lingering fear. "What happened?" "They became dogs, our most loyal companions. We turned predators into family through patience and understanding." Dennis moved to the side wounds, applying antibacterial gel that would work with Hadros 9 biology. "The galaxy sees your species as monsters because of Telos 3. But I bet if someone had tried talking first instead of shooting, that whole tragedy could have been avoided." The Ravager made a sound different from the threatening roars, softer, almost questioning, its 4 eyes half closed as Dennis finished treating its wounds. "There you go," Dennis said, sitting back. "That should help. You will be sore for a while, but the infection risk is way down now." He pulled out food rations from his supply bag, opening several and placing them within easy reach of the creature. The Ravager sniffed them cautiously, then began eating with careful, deliberate movements. Dennis watched it eat, a small smile on his face. Behind him, Rin was recording everything, knowing that what they were witnessing would change how the galaxy understood Death World predators. The Ravager finished eating and looked at Dennis for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, it moved closer. Its massive armored head came within centimeters of Dennis, close enough that he could feel its breath. It was testing him, trying to understand this strange, soft creature that showed no fear but only kindness. Dennis reached out slowly and placed his hand on the armored plate between the Ravager's primary eyes. The creature went very still. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, it began to purr. Rin felt their whole worldview shifting. This was impossible, and yet it was happening. The purring sound filled the cargo bay, a deep rumbling vibration that Rin could feel through the floor. It was not a sound of aggression. It was contentment. The Thornback Ravager, legendary killer of Telos 3, was purring like an oversized house pet, while a human gently scratched behind its armored head ridge. Dennis smiled. "You are just a big softy, are not you?" The creature's 4 eyes were half closed in what could only be described as pleasure. Its venomous spines lay flat against its back, completely non-threatening. One of its 8 limbs reached out and gently, carefully touched Dennis's leg. The claws that could tear through titanium were retracted, the touch almost gentle. Commander Horvath's voice came over the comm, hushed with disbelief. "I am watching the feeds. This cannot be real." "It is very real," Rin said, their own voice filled with wonder. They approached slowly, watching Dennis interact with the creature that had sent the entire station into panic just hours before. "Commander, request permission for station xenobiologist Dr. Pollenth to come to Cargo Bay 12. This needs to be documented properly." "Approved," Horvath said, "but security stays outside with weapons ready." Within minutes, Dr. Pollenth arrived, a meridian with sensor equipment built into her elongated fingers. She stopped just inside the doorway, her sensors already reading the scene before her. Her face, which could show little emotion due to her species' rigid features, somehow managed to convey complete shock. "The stress hormone levels," she said, studying her readings. "They are completely normalized. This creature is not afraid. It is not aggressive. It is treating the human as—" She paused, recalibrating her sensors as if she could not believe the data. "It is treating the human as a pack member." "How is this possible?" Dennis looked up from where he sat beside the Ravager. "It is not that complicated. She was scared, hurt, and lost. I showed her kindness," she responded. "But the Telos 3 incident was our fault, not theirs," Dennis interrupted gently. "I read the full reports, not just the summary. The colony identified Thornback Ravagers as pests and started extermination protocols. They used sonic weapons that cause extreme pain, plasma nets that burned, poison that made them die slowly. The Ravagers were not hunting the colonists. They were defending their territory and their families from what they perceived as an attack." Dr. Pollenth moved closer, her sensors working overtime. The Ravager watched her but showed no aggression, seemingly understanding that she posed no threat as long as Dennis remained calm. "We classified them as non-sentient predators, based on limited observation," the doctor said quietly. "But these readings suggest complex emotional responses, social bonding capabilities, even signs of higher reasoning. Because nobody tried to understand them," Dennis said. "They just saw teeth and armor and decided these were mindless killing machines. But look at her. Really look." The Ravager tilted its massive head, regarding Dr. Pollenth with curious eyes. It made a soft chirping sound, different from the roars and growls from before. The doctor's sensors flickered rapidly. "That vocalization is modulated for communication," Dr. Pollenth said in amazement. "She is trying to talk to me." Dennis stood slowly, and the Ravager tracked his movement with all 4 eyes. When he moved toward Dr. Pollenth, the creature followed, staying close to his side. Its injured leg made it move with a slight limp, but it seemed determined to maintain proximity to the human who had helped it. "On Earth," Dennis explained, "we have this concept in wildlife management. Every animal, no matter how dangerous, is just trying to survive. Aggression usually comes from fear, territorial instinct, or protecting young. If you can address those needs without threatening the animal, you can coexist." Rin had been recording everything, but now they spoke up. "You said your people turned wolves into dogs. But surely that took generations of selective breeding." "The breeding came later," Dennis said. "The initial bond was built on mutual benefit. Wolves got reliable food and protection. Humans got help hunting and an early warning system for danger. Both species survived better together than apart." The Ravager made that purring sound again and, to everyone's shock, lowered itself to the floor and rolled partially onto its side. It was an incredibly vulnerable position for such a massive predator. Dr. Pollenth's sensors went wild. That is a trust display, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In the wild, Hadros 9 predators only expose their softer underside to pack members they completely trust. I have never seen this directed toward another species. Dennis knelt beside the Ravager and gently touched its side, checking the treated wounds. The creature remained relaxed, eyes half closed, that rumbling purr constant and deep. You are not special, Rin said suddenly. I do not mean that as an insult. I mean this is not some unique human ability you possess, correct? Dennis looked up at them and smiled. That is exactly right. Any species could do this. You just have to be willing to try. To see past the fear and look at the individual being in front of you. Dr. Pollenth was already making plans. We need to completely revise our classification of thornback ravagers. They are not mindless predators. They are intelligent social creatures. The entire Talos 3 disaster was a tragic misunderstanding. And it can never happen again, Commander Horvath said over the comm. He had been listening to everything. I am initiating new protocols for all Deathworld species. Mandatory consultation with beings experienced in dangerous wildlife before any extermination or containment procedures are approved. The Ravager suddenly shifted, moving closer to Dennis. It laid its massive head on his lap, a gesture so similar to Earth dogs that Rin almost laughed. Here was a creature that had been transported in a cage, drugged and treated as dangerous cargo, injured itself escaping, and sent an entire station into terror. And now it was cuddling with a human cargo specialist like they were old friends. Dennis stroked the armored plates gently. We need to get you home, he said softly. Back to Hadros 9 where you belong. Would you like that? The Ravager made a soft sound, somewhere between a chirp and a rumble. Its tail, thick and covered in smaller armor plates, thumped against the floor twice. I think that is a yes, Rin said, moving close enough to touch the creature for the first time. Their crystalline hand trembled slightly. Years of fear fighting against new understanding. The Ravager watched them approach, then gently nudged Rin's hand with its snout. She likes you, Dennis said with a grin. Congratulations, Rin. You just made friends with the most dangerous predator in the sector. Rin felt something shift inside them, some fundamental change in how they saw the universe. They had spent their whole life following protocols, staying safe, avoiding risks. But here was proof that understanding could bridge any gap, that fear could be overcome with patience and compassion. What do we call her? Rin asked. Dennis thought for a moment. Scout. Because she was scouting for a way home. The Ravager, now named Scout, made that purring sound again as if approving of her new name. In that cargo bay, surrounded by containers from 100 different worlds, 3 beings from 3 different planets sat together in peace. It was a small moment, but it would change everything. Word spread through Brightness 7 faster than light-speed communications. Within hours, beings from every section of the station found excuses to pass by Cargo Bay 12. They pressed against windows, watched through surveillance feeds, and whispered in dozens of languages about the impossible sight of a human sitting peacefully beside a Deathworld predator. Dennis had moved Scout to a larger, more comfortable area of the bay. He requisitioned heating elements to match Hadros 9's higher temperatures and brought in more vegetation samples. Scout stayed close to him constantly, following him around the bay like an enormous armored shadow. Dr. Pollenth had set up a temporary research station in one corner, her sensors constantly recording data. This is unprecedented, she said for perhaps the 20th time. Scout's neural patterns show complex problem-solving abilities. Social bonding mechanisms similar to pack hunters on a dozen worlds. She is processing language patterns, trying to understand our communication. She is smart, Dennis agreed, watching Scout investigate a new container of supplies. Just because something looks like a monster does not mean it thinks like one. Commander Horvath arrived in person, flanked by security officers who looked decidedly uncomfortable. The Dalmar administrator had seen the footage, read the reports, but seeing it in person was different. Scout was massive, her armored bulk filling a significant portion of the cargo bay. Her claws left marks in the metal flooring. Her teeth could tear through bone like it was soft fruit, and yet she sat calmly beside Dennis, occasionally making that rumbling purr sound. I owe you an apology, Horvath said stiffly. I nearly killed you both by ordering the bay vented. You were following protocol, Dennis said without judgment. Protocol said Scout was a threat. Now we know better. Now we know we do not know enough, Horvath corrected. He approached slowly, watching Scout's reaction. The Ravager regarded him with all four eyes but remained calm. I have been in station administration for 30 years. I have seen dozens of Death World species come through here. We always treat them as cargo or threats, never as individuals. Rin emerged from behind a container, their crystalline form shimmering in the bay's lighting. They had barely left since the incident began. Fascinated by everything they were learning, I have been reviewing records from other stations. Scout is not unique. There have been other incidents with Death World predators that ended peacefully when beings took time to understand, instead of reacting with violence. And how many ended in tragedy because we shot first? Dr. Pollenth asked quietly. The question hung in the air, uncomfortable and necessary. Scout moved closer to Dennis, sensing the tension in the room. He placed a hand on her armored head and she settled down again. I grew up on Earth, Dennis said, breaking the silence, specifically in a wildlife preserve near what used to be Yellowstone. My father was a conservation officer. His job was managing dangerous animals, bears, mountain lions, wolves, creatures that could kill a human easily. He paused, remembering. Scout leaned against him, providing support without knowing why it was needed. The most important thing he taught me was that fear makes terrible decisions. Yes, these animals could kill us, but they did not want to. They wanted to eat, sleep, raise their young, and be left alone. Once you understand that, once you stop seeing them as enemies and start seeing them as neighbors, everything changes. Horvath nodded slowly. And this philosophy, it is common among humans? Common enough, Dennis said. We are a Death World species. We grew up surrounded by things that could kill us. We had two choices, kill everything dangerous or learn to coexist. We chose both, depending on the situation. But coexistence always came first. War was the last option, not the first. A group of station personnel had gathered outside the bay, watching through the transparent aluminum windows. Among them were species who had fled in terror just hours ago. Now they watched in wonder as Scout playfully batted at a supply container, her movements almost kitten-like despite her enormous size. May I touch her? Horvath asked suddenly. Dennis looked surprised but nodded. Move slowly. Let her see your hands. Talk to her. She responds well to calm voices. The commander approached, his bureaucratic stiffness giving way to genuine curiosity. Scout watched him come closer, her head tilting in that questioning manner. Horvath extended one hand carefully and Scout sniffed it, her nostrils flaring as she learned his scent. Then gently, she pressed her armored snout against his palm. Horvath stood frozen for a moment, then carefully stroked the ridge between her eyes. Scout's purr deepened. The Dulmar administrator, who had nearly ordered this creature killed, was now petting her like she was a beloved companion animal. Remarkable, he whispered. Truly remarkable. Dr. Pollenth was recording everything, her excitement barely contained. I need to write new papers. Revise entire sections of xenobiology text. The implications are enormous. How many species have we misjudged? How many potential relationships have we destroyed through fear and misunderstanding? Too many, Rin said softly. But we can change that. We can learn from this. Over the next several hours, more beings came to meet Scout. Each approach was careful, supervised by Dennis, but each one ended in peaceful contact. The Ravager seemed to understand she was making history, accepting attention from dozens of different species with patient grace. A young Keshan child, no more than 5 standard years old, pressed against the window with wide eyes. Is the big creature nice? She asked her parent. Yes, the parent replied, their voice full of wonder. Yes, it turns out she's very nice. Dennis watched the scene unfold, feeling something shift in the station's collective consciousness. Fear was being replaced by curiosity. Assumptions were being challenged. Scout was not just a Ravager anymore. She was Scout, an individual with personality and preferences capable of friendship and trust. When do we take her home? Rin asked, standing beside Dennis. Soon, Dennis said. Dr. Pollenth needs to finish her initial assessments. And we need to prepare the transport properly. No more cages. No more sedation unless absolutely necessary. We do this right. Scout made a soft chirping sound as if agreeing with the plan. She had found safety with these strange beings from other worlds, particularly the soft one who showed her kindness when everyone else showed fear. But home called to her. That distant world with familiar scents and familiar grounds. I am coming with you, Rin announced suddenly. To Hadros 9, Someone needs to document the return properly. And I want to see her homeworld, understand where she comes from. Dennis smiled. Welcome to the team. Commander Horvath cleared his throat. I am establishing a new position. Interspecies Relations Specialist. Dennis Cole, the job is yours if you want it. We need someone who understands that not every dangerous creature is an enemy. Dennis looked at Scout, who was now surrounded by admirers, all keeping respectful distance but showing genuine interest rather than fear. He thought about all the other misunderstood creatures in the galaxy, all the species labeled as monsters because nobody took time to understand them. I accept, he said, on one condition. Name it. Every Deathworld species that comes through this station gets evaluated for intelligence and social capability before any containment decisions are made. No more assumptions. No more shooting first and asking questions never. Horvath extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Deal. Scout, seeming to sense the importance of the moment, let out a triumphant roar that echoed through the cargo bay. But it was not a roar of aggression or threat. It was a roar of joy, of connection, of hope for a future where understanding could bridge even the widest gulfs between species. The transport ship was nothing like the cargo vessel that had brought Scout to Brightness 7. This was a proper passenger craft, modified for her comfort. The holding area had been transformed into a habitat space with proper temperature control, familiar vegetation from Hadros 9, and most importantly, windows. Scout could see the stars, watch their journey home unfold. Dennis sat with her during the 3-day voyage, talking about Earth and listening to her various chirps and rumbles as if they were having real conversations. Rin observed everything, recording data and taking notes that would form the basis of new interspecies protocols. Dr. Pollenth had provided them with extensive documentation. Scout was not an anomaly. Her species showed all the markers of social intelligence, complex emotional responses, and sophisticated communication. The tragedy of Telos 3 had been entirely preventable, the result of fear and misunderstanding rather than any inherent evil in the Ravagers themselves. Are you nervous? Rin asked Dennis on the final day of travel. About what? Meeting more of her kind. An entire world of creatures like Scout. Dennis smiled. A little. But mostly excited. This is first contact done right. We are not conquerors or colonizers. We are just bringing their family member home and learning what we can. Hadros 9 appeared on the view screen, a world of deep purples and reds, dense jungles and towering mountain ranges. It was classified as Class 12 Death World for good reason. The atmosphere had slightly higher oxygen content than standard. The gravity was 1.3 times Earth normal, and the native species were all adapted for extreme survival. Scout pressed against the window, all 4 eyes fixed on her home world. She made sounds Dennis had never heard before, complex vocalizations that might have been joy or anticipation or relief, probably all 3. They landed in a clearing that surveys had shown was neutral territory, far from the regions where Telos 3 colonists had tried to establish their doomed settlement. The ship's sensors detected multiple large life forms in the surrounding jungle, watching, waiting. That is her pack, Dr. Pollenth said over the communications link from the ship. They know she is here. Dennis opened the cargo door slowly. The air that rushed in was hot and humid, thick with organic scents that made Scout's entire body quiver with recognition. She stepped forward but paused, looking back at Dennis. Go on, he said gently. Your family is waiting. Scout made a soft chirping sound, then did something that made Rin gasp in surprise. She carefully, deliberately pressed her armored head against Dennis's chest. It was a gesture of affection, of gratitude, of goodbye. Then she turned and bounded down the ramp, her injured leg clearly healed enough for her to move with surprising speed. From the jungle, 3 more Thornback Ravagers emerged. They were larger than Scout, probably full adults compared to her subadult status. For a moment, Dennis felt a flicker of fear. These were wild creatures, unknown, unpredictable. The largest one approached Scout and they touched heads in what was clearly a greeting gesture. Then all 4 Ravagers turned to look at the ship, at the 2 beings standing in the doorway. Should we go back inside? Rin whispered. No, Dennis said quietly. Trust them like Scout trusted us. The largest Ravager moved forward slowly, deliberately. Its 4 eyes studied Dennis with intense focus. This was the moment that would determine everything. Would Scout's acceptance of aliens transfer to her pack? Or would human and Avalari be seen as threats? Scout chirped urgently. moving between Dennis and the larger Ravager. She was communicating something, her body language clear even across species barriers. The large Ravager tilted its head, listening, processing. Then it did something extraordinary. It lowered its massive head and made a sound almost identical to Scout's greeting purr. "She told them about you," Rin said in wonder. "She explained that you helped her." Dennis slowly extended his hand, palm forward, the same non-threatening gesture he had used during their first meeting. The large Ravager sniffed his hand carefully, learning his scent. Then with surprising gentleness it pressed its snout against his palm. Rin made a sound that might have been laughter or tears or both. "You just made peaceful contact with a wild Death World predator. This is impossible. This is necessary," Dennis corrected. "This is how it should always be." The other two Ravagers approached, curious now rather than cautious. Soon Dennis and Rin were surrounded by Thornback Ravagers being investigated and apparently accepted. Scout moved among her pack members, clearly communicating, her sounds complex and nuanced. They spent hours in that clearing, documenting behavior, taking careful notes, learning what they could. The Ravagers showed them hunting grounds, water sources, even what appeared to be den sites where young were raised. It was a gift of trust, a window into a world that had been labeled too dangerous to understand. As the sun set on Hadros 9, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Scout approached Dennis one final time. She touched her head to his chest again, held it there for a long moment, then turned and walked into the jungle with her pack. She paused at the tree line, looked back once, then disappeared into the shadows. "Will we see her again?" Rin asked. "Maybe," Dennis said. "Or maybe this was just the beginning of something bigger." They returned to Brightness 7 as heroes, their footage and documentation changing how the galaxy viewed Death World predators. Commander Horvath established formal protocols based on their experience. Other stations adopted similar policies. Slowly, carefully, the galactic community began to reconsider their approach to dangerous species. Dennis's office was flooded with requests. A mining colony on Verilon 6 was having trouble with indigenous predators. A research station near the Outer Rim needed consultation on local fauna. A diplomatic vessel wanted advice on how to approach a newly discovered species that seemed aggressive, but might just be misunderstood. He took them all. Each case was different, each species unique, but the fundamental approach remained the same. Observe, understand, communicate. See the individual being, not just the threat. Give fear time to transform into knowledge. Rin became his partner in this work, their own transformation from protocol-focused officer to understanding advocate complete. Together they traveled the galaxy, building bridges between species that had never thought peaceful coexistence was possible. 6 months after returning Scout to Hadros 9, Dennis received a transmission. It was grainy footage from a survey drone that had passed near their landing site. In the clearing where they had said goodbye, someone had arranged stones in a pattern, a marker that could be seen from space. And near those stones, a Thornback Ravager sat watching the sky. Dennis smiled. Some bonds, it seemed, transcended species, distance, and time. Scout was home, but she had not forgotten. And somewhere in the galaxy, there were countless other creatures waiting for someone to see past their teeth and claws to the beings they truly were. The work continued. The bridge between worlds grew stronger, and humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy was not their technology or their strength, but their hard-won wisdom that every life deserved understanding before judgment. It was a lesson written in the history of a death world, taught by a species that learned to live with monsters by recognizing that monsters were made, not born. And now, one human at a time, one creature at a time, the galaxy was learning it too.